Welcome to RealGM Radio, a quick solo show for you today. We're going to try to keep this one to 30 or so minutes, 30 or 40 minutes. I've got three things that I want to talk to you about. I'm going to tell you where the league is wrong about the second apron, the latest on LeBron and why I think a decision is taking so long. And then I did something fun where I rebuilt the NBA season based on the World Cup format. We're going to see if that works. A reminder, though, really quick, subscribe to RealGM Radio on YouTube. We are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers on our newly relaunched YouTube channel so that we can get monetized. So if you're watching, go ahead and subscribe right now. And if you're listening, please go check us out on YouTube and subscribe. It's also a great place to check out quick clips of the show. All of those subscriptions, all of it really does help. But right now, let's jump in. All right, I want to start today's show talking about this trend of complaining about the second apron and some of the things that I think are being twisted by the online conversation about all of this. But I also think that this is the rare case where people in the league are more wrong than people online and are starting to drive some of the worst takes that I've heard about all of this second apron CBA stuff. So I want to talk about this because two stories came out this morning at ESPN and over at The Athletic from insiders who talk to people in the league. First one is from Brian Windhorst over at ESPN. League sources telling Windhorst that salary dumping is becoming a yearly trend, and it's something that we're seeing every single offseason now. And then over at The Athletic, David Kelly, who runs the Players Association, went to The Athletic to basically just complain about the second apron and make some claims about what the players will try to get when they renegotiate the CBA in 3 years. Both of these stories were set off, by the way, by the Thunder trading Lou Dort, which Sam Presti called in his press conference a financially driven move, echoing a lot of, frankly, what Brad Stevens had to say when the Celtics traded away Jaylen Brown. And it's become this thing now where you've got general managers, front office guys, guys who are running these teams, when they have to answer to reporters about, hey, why did you trade this fan favorite, whether it's Jaylen Brown or Lou Dort? It used to be the case where the last thing that these people would say is, hey, it was because of the money, right? They would blame basketball reasons or something off the court or avoid the question altogether. But because of this second apron, people in the league, people in Sam Presti and Brad Stevens' seat, they can now sit there and just be like, hey, don't blame me. We would love to keep your fan favorite player here, but it's the second apron's fault that we can't keep them here. And I'm not buying that for a lot of different reasons, right? I think when when it comes to Jaylen Brown and Lou Dort, there are basketball reasons as to why those players are no longer with their teams, why they got traded. We'll get to those here in a second. But you know, you're seeing Lou Dort get traded by the Thunder. You saw Jaylen Brown get traded by the Celtics, and in both of those instances, you had the people who were in charge of trading these players blame the second apron. So you're seeing a trend here. The Knicks also let Mitchell Robinson walk after they won the championship, and you saw the online conversation around Mitchell Robinson, although the Knicks didn't answer questions about it, not surprisingly. But the online conversation around Mitchell Robinson and the Knicks was, how could you let this guy walk away? Despite the fact that he played, he played 60 games last year, but couldn't play 20 minutes a night, and that was the most games he's played, the most minutes he's played total over the last half decade. This is a guy who's routinely unavailable. And so, look, you get to now this trend of teams complaining and blaming the second apron for their inability to keep these players, which, by the way, is exactly how they organize this thing, right? The second apron, this thing that they want to stay out of, you're already hearing it being called a hard cap by people inside the league for the first time, where I think people outside the league, people like me, people in the media who do what I do, have been calling this a hard cap for a couple of years now because it's pretty clear as to what it's designed to do. But I want to go back to this ESPN story because you got a league source telling Brian Windhorst, quote, "We're getting to the point where we can start comparing second apron teams' salary dumping year over year. OKC got better deals in Boston last year. I'll give them that." To that point of we're getting to what this Eastern Conference general manager told Windhorst, we're getting to the point where we could start comparing second apron teams' salary dumping year over year. I think it's overstating the issue, if I'm being honest. This is where I kind of have my issues with the conversation around the second apron in the CBA. Okay. Am I a fan of the second apron? Not really. I think it's a little too complicated, but I'm not against the idea of some sort of hard cap. And I don't think it's some affront to team building, to the Players Association, to fans. I think this is what it is. I think you have a hard cap, and when you have any kind of salary cap, hard, soft, second apron, first apron, whatever it is, you're going to have to sacrifice something financially. Or else, if we're not doing that, then just be Major League Baseball and have no salary cap. But as long as you have some kind of salary cap, regardless of the look and the design of it, you are going to have financial penalty. You're going to have sacrifice things because of financial reasons. That's the point of the salary cap, okay? It's to create parity. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But even when we're talking about the sacrifices financially, are we sure there's been a ton of sacrifices? Are these real sacrifices? It's easy to come off the heels of a Jaylen Brown trade and hear what Brad Stevens said to reporters in the Lou Dort trade and hear what Sam Presti said to reporters and be like, oh, the second apron, we can't keep our teams together because of the CBA and the second apron. Really? Are we sure? Because let's dive into some of these issues, right? Boston, we'll take them first. You know, you have that Eastern Conference executives telling Windhorst, Boston did it last year, OKC did it this year. Boston got rid of aging players last summer. Kristaps Porzingis, Drew Holiday. I mean, Luke Cornett was a tough one, but I mean, look at what Porzingis has done since he left Boston. Look at what Drew Holiday has done since he left Boston. Like, these guys haven't exactly lit the world on fire with their new teams. They kind of got out early on those guys. And then the Jaylen Brown trade happens, and you've got Brad Stevens saying, well, you know, if we had some sort of cap break where these guys didn't count so much against the cap, but we could still pay them. You know, we have 70% of our cap tied up into Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. We just couldn't do it between two guys. Okay, maybe. But there's a lot of basketball reasons also why maybe the Celtics wanted to get rid of Jaylen Brown, right? Maybe a lot of off-the-court issues that they had with Jaylen Brown. The issue wasn't that Jaylen Brown was taking up so much of the cap. That was part of it. But they were also paying Jaylen Brown more than he's worth. Cap or no cap. And you want to know how I know? Because the entire league told you, yeah, we're not that interested in Jaylen Brown. And the only trade that was out there was Paul George and 2 first-round picks and essentially what was a salary dump. That's not the Celtics saying we can't pay Jaylen Brown this much because of some sort of percentage of the cap. That's the entire league telling you, we think you overpaid Jaylen Brown. The problem for Boston wasn't the fact that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum were accounting for 70% of the cap. The problem for Boston was that they overpaid Jaylen Brown for this contract in the first place. That was the original sin there. That's the problem. OKC, they lose Lou Dort, who was getting worse, was a net minus in the Western Conference Finals that they lost to San Antonio. And by the way, they traded Lou Dort and only got second-round picks back. But nobody's talking about this if the Thunder just exercised his team option and let him walk in free agency a month ago. Nobody's talking about the Thunder in regards to the second apron because of that. You lose Dort, you lose a couple of bench guys like Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins. And that's what this Eastern Conference executive is saying. Oh, this is a salary dump and the second apron and all this stuff. You lost 3 bench guys. Dort was a starter last year, but he wasn't going to start this coming season even if he was on the roster. And they were ready to walk away from him anyway. What did the Thunder really lose here? They didn't have to lose Shea, Chet, Jalen Williams. They're keeping Cason Wallace. They're keeping AJ Mitchell. We'll see. They're keeping Isaiah Hartenstein, where a lot of people thought that they were going to have to dump him. They didn't dump him. Like, we're acting like the Thunder have had to break up this team. Everything that I'm reading and listening to, they're like, oh, they had to break up this team. They were going to have to lose guys anyway because of all their first-round picks that they have. Like, what are we talking about with the Thunder? They're not breaking anything up. These are rotation, like, bench guys. Wiggins and Isaiah Joe didn't even play for them in the most important playoff games. What are we talking about here? And then with the Knicks, they lose Mitchell Robinson. And instead of overpaying Mitchell Robinson like the Celtics just did, they go get Andre Drummond at a fraction of the cost. Drummond's not as good as Mitchell Robinson, but he's a comparable offensive rebounder, a better offensive player, not as good as a defensive player. But that's good business considering what you're letting walk away and what you're getting. And Drummond is more available than Mitchell Robinson. That can end up being actually a net positive for the Knicks. So this idea that the second apron is breaking up these teams, these championship teams. What's the team? Boston? Really? And are we sure that Boston is the team broken up by the second apron? Right? I think the Jason Tatum injury, the Achilles tear, might have been the best thing to happen to Boston because it gave them cover to revamp the roster, to trade Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis when you can actually get stuff back for them. Right? Those were aging guys. They got younger after spending a ton of money on role players. And if a Celtics fan wants to tell me, well, we weren't able to keep Porzingis and Holiday and Jaylen Brown together, like, nobody told you to spend $20 million plus a year on every single starter that you have and $10+ million a year on multiple bench guys. When was the last time in NBA history that you were able to have a starting lineup like the Celtics had in 2024, where all of those guys were all-star caliber guys when they were on the court? Plus Al Horford, plus Sam Hauser coming off the bench. Like, we had kind of entered this weird super team phase where you needed a perfect starting lineup and rotation to win the championship. But think about NBA history. That's never been the case. I think about, like, the Big Three Heat. They started Mario Chalmers. Like, Mario Chalmers isn't starting for a championship team over the last decade. That's not happening. Derek Fisher starting for the Lakers. Like, those guys don't start. Those guys were starters for championship teams, but they couldn't have been starters for championship teams over the last decade. We're acting like the NBA has done something different. The real anomaly is like the last decade where you needed Kevin Durant and the Warriors, or the Celtics had to go out and buy a bunch of role players to make a championship run and then had to lose them because of finances. We're acting like that was the norm. No, that was the exception. Okay, we're getting back to what normal NBA championship teams looked like. A little flawed, but playing their best basketball at the right time. So I'm just not buying it, right? I'm not buying that all these guys are getting broken up because of some second apron, that all these championship teams are getting broken up from because of the second apron. The other part of this was the Athletic story. Kelly to the Athletic saying that while the league has claimed that the apron system has created parity, Kelly believes, I'm reading from this piece here, Kelly believes it forces front offices to take rosters apart when they become too pricey. Players can no longer choose their teams as frequently, with free agency diminished and teams using extensions to keep players and then trade them. That, he believes, is an area of concern for the union, even if its constituents get their full share of BRI. All right, this is the part that really pissed me off. Okay? I'm going to take this. There's like 3 distinct parts to this quote here, and I'm going to take them piece by piece. All right? Number 1, quote, while the league has claimed that the apron system has created parity, Kelly believes it forces front offices to take apart rosters when they become too pricey, end quote. Isn't this what people wanted? This is what you all wanted. Parity instead of the super teams. Nobody wanted the super teams anymore. People wanted the parity. This is what you wanted. Like, what are we talking about here? Second part. Players can no longer choose their teams as frequently, with free agency diminished and teams using extensions to keep players and then trade them. What? Teams using extensions to keep players? The players are signing the extensions. They are getting 100% guaranteed money on these extensions. The players don't have to sign the extensions. If they want to become free agents, they can become free agents, but the league instituted a supermax to try to keep these players in place. Again, you wanted this. You wanted teams to be able to keep their stars instead of them going to big markets in free agency. The Players Association, you designed it this way. The NBA and the Players Association wanted it this way. The owners didn't want their star player. The owners in small markets didn't want their players to move. And the Players Association wanted their players to make a lot of money. And that's exactly what happened. And even when those star players do get traded, it's for other reasons, right? Like the Mavericks traded Luka to the Lakers. Nobody knows why. That was ridiculous. You know, the Bucks traded Giannis, sure, after several Supermax contracts and 13 seasons in Milwaukee. That's a win. The face of international basketball until Victor Wembanyama showed up, staying in Milwaukee for 13 years is a major win for the NBA. Him leaving Milwaukee to Miami should not be viewed as Your classic star leaving small market for big market. Not after 13 seasons and a championship in Milwaukee. That is a win for Milwaukee, for Giannis, and for the league, and for the Players Association. Minnesota traded Karl-Anthony Towns. Sure. They weren't able to keep their homegrown guy. Why? Not because of the second apron, because they chose Rudy Gobert instead. Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid, by the way, instead of Cat. If they wanted to keep Cat, they could have kept Cat, but they chose Gobert. They liked the fit with Gobert and Anthony Edwards more than Cat. They chose Gobert. That's why Cat's not in Minnesota. It's not because of the second apron. It's because they chose a different center. So I just think all of this complaining is wrong and misguided and way blown out of proportion. And I think it's the rare case, again, when people in the league are blowing it out of proportion. You get the Players Association making things up that don't make any sense. You've got general managers using the second apron as cover to make basketball decisions that might have been otherwise unpopular with the fan base. And the other part of this is that all of this complaining, I think, really distracts from the big wins that the players got in the CBA. Nate Duncan pointed this out on his podcast the other day. I saw it on a clip. And it's a great point, right? The salary floor getting moved to the start of the year, where teams have to meet a salary floor at the beginning of the season as opposed to the end of the season, is making it so that these players are getting paid. The players got 51% basketball-related income. They are getting paid more on the whole after the latest CBA than they got before. Those are huge, major wins, right? Players being extension eligible 2 years before their new extension, supermax contracts for multiple guys. These are all huge wins for the Players Association, and yet you've got David Kelly out here complaining about how it's unfair to the players, and you've got general managers talking about how it's unfair for the spirit of the game and keeping these teams together or whatever it is. I think that's ignoring some of the really big wins that they got here. One more thing from this athletic story, another thing that pissed me off. David Kelly said that he wants to see teams and the league make further investments, again, reading from the piece here, in research and standards to keep players healthy, believing neither the NBA nor the union has done enough so far. He cited the rash of Achilles injuries during last season as an example of something the league should have data on and be able to understand and eventually prevent. He said the union is even willing to budge on using wearables in games, which is currently prohibited by the CBA in the right context. We're talking about player health. Adam Silver has talked about player health. David Kelly is talking about player health. All these people are talking about player health. You know what they're not talking about? Playing fewer games. And this is where I don't buy any of what any of these people are saying, and they're all just out looking out for themselves. If you really want to fix the NBA, fewer games is the answer. And it is consistently the only thing that is never brought up by anybody. Why? Because it would cost them money in the short term, even though everybody knows it's best for the league in the long term. And trust me, they know it's best for the league in the long term. They are just not willing to sacrifice the money in the short term. So owners, players, GMs, coaches, everybody can miss me with their complaints about the second apron, parity, the NBA, all of it. Because the only thing anyone really wants at the end of the day is to get paid. And that's what you all have in common. All right, second topic for today, LeBron James, the latest on him. Rich Paul said on his podcast that LeBron does not have a timeline for his decision, and he isn't going to be rushed, despite pressure from the media, fans, and the league even, to make his free agent decision. We have Adam Silver publicly saying, hey, we need, by the way, LeBron, dude, you got to make a choice here because we got to get the NBA schedule out. We got to announce the Christmas Day games and all of these things. You could argue that whatever team gets LeBron is going to have 20 more national televised games than they do already. 20, 30 more national TV games than they do already. I mean, it's a big deal. Obviously, where LeBron James goes, it's why everybody's waiting on this. But Rich Paul just saying, hey, we don't, despite all this pressure from outside forces, we don't have a timeline for this decision. And he's making it sound like he doesn't know when this is going to happen. And it's kind of making it sound like LeBron still hasn't decided where he wants to play. And if we don't hear something in the next 24 hours, I think that's the only logical reason why. Because as soon as the World Cup ended, you have a lot of people, insiders, other people claiming that they think we'll get a decision from LeBron within 24, 30, 48 hours of something of the World Cup ending. and we still haven't gotten it. I'm recording this on Tuesday morning at 10:20 a.m. Eastern time. So, I mean, it could happen any minute, I suppose, theoretically. But based on what Rich Paul was saying, it doesn't sound like it's happening anytime soon. And again, if we don't hear something in the next 24 hours, I truly believe that maybe LeBron just doesn't know where he wants to go yet. The only other reason I could figure out as to why this is taking so long is leverage, maybe, based on just how LeBron has played out his career so far. Like, he tends to use whatever he has and leverage in terms of making his teams better. But I'm struggling to see how leverage would come into play here unless he's trying to get somebody like the Warriors to trade for Anthony Davis before he signs there or something like that. But I don't really see how leverage comes into play here. So I don't think it's leverage. I understand that people think, oh, he wants the content, he likes the attention and all of this stuff. He already's gotten 3-4 weeks of attention, 3 or 4 weeks of content. And as soon as that Fanatics Fest ended on Thursday and Friday, I mean, there was so much. If you really need content for the documentary, you got so much out of those 2 days and multiple live tapings of podcasts and things like that. You got so much content out of that stuff. I can't imagine that you need any more, right? You've got talking heads talking about every team that LeBron could go to over the last 3 weeks. There's plenty of B-roll. There's plenty of footage. Like, at this stage, I don't think content makes any sense. Like, this is the boring part, right? I don't know what interesting content is coming out of this part of it. So I don't think it's content. I don't think it's leverage. And I don't really think any of these teams can make other moves because, as we're seeing around the league, teams don't want to make moves because they're waiting for LeBron. So everything is kind of on hold, just waiting for LeBron James to make his decision, which is why I think if we don't hear something in the next day, I think he truly doesn't know where he wants to go, right? Like, maybe he doesn't say anything on Monday because he wants to let the World Cup breathe a little bit, and then he says something on Tuesday, maybe. But if we don't hear anything, maybe he just doesn't know where he wants to go. And you could say, well, how? Right? All that information is out there. Rich Paul again said on his podcast, we have all the information. It's out there. No need to call us. We have everything we need. Well, LeBron knows all the information. He's had a long time to think about it. Why wouldn't he know where he wants to go yet? Maybe this isn't basketball related. So at the risk of guessing and trying to get in LeBron's head and into his family business a little bit too much here, my guess is that something else is pulling LeBron in a different direction, or in different directions, perhaps. That's not basketball related. There are reports that he doesn't really want to uproot his family from LA, specifically his daughter who's finishing up school. That's a big deal for him. He doesn't necessarily want to do that. You know, where does Savannah want to go? Where does she want to live? Anything like that, anything related. That's my best guess is at this point, it's, you know, I know the basketball dynamics. I know what all the basketball fits are. We have all the basketball information. Now maybe LeBron is working on some family stuff, trying to figure out those family dynamics of, okay, if we're going to do XYZ, what do we need to do to make it happen and make sure that my family is happy? Because the one thing we do know about LeBron James, and he has proven this over and over again, is that his family is really important to him, to the point where he wanted to play with his son, with the Lakers, right? Like, we know how important family is to LeBron James. And so, you know, if that's maybe something that's going on behind the scenes, is my guess. Again, I don't want to go too far into it because I'm literally guessing and speculating about somebody's family life, which doesn't make me totally comfortable. But it's the only thing I could think of in terms of why this is taking so long at this point. I still think Miami is the best place for him from a basketball fit, from a off the court fit, from a, you know, personal life happiness fit. I think Miami is the best place. I've been on this from the very beginning. It now starts to sound like national media is coming around to my point of view, where I understood why the national media was at first skeptical of the Miami fit, right? Because on its face, you see Giannis, you see Bam, non-shooters. You're like, well, that doesn't make sense. And then you move on. But as I've been saying on this show and over at Locked On Heat for the last couple of weeks, you got to go beyond that, right? The shooting isn't ideal, but I don't think there's an ideal fit for any of these teams. Again, if there was an ideal basketball fit, LeBron's probably already signed there. So all these teams have their own warts and concerns. I just think that the Heat have the best way to mitigate those warts and concerns because, yeah, they lack a little bit of spacing, but they also have the best player on the board in Giannis, the best coach on the board in Eric Spoelstra, and the best front office on the board with what they've got going on. It's also the most familiar for LeBron. You might be like, wait, Wes, what do you mean most familiar? That's Cleveland. Cleveland's home. Okay, yeah. Cleveland, like the city is maybe the most familiar to LeBron. The organization is not. Not anymore. I know his guy Weems works in the front office. Kobe Altman's still there, but he has no relationship with Kenny Atkinson or that coaching staff. He has no real relationship with anybody on that roster in terms of playing with them. LeBron has a real relationship with Bam Adebayo from Team USA. And as we've seen for LeBron, Team USA matters in terms of making his decisions, right? It's why he ends up partnering with Dwayne Wade and going to Miami and Chris Bosh. He forms a bond with Anthony Davis, right? Ends up with the Lakers. And it wouldn't surprise me if LeBron wanted to play with Bam, right? And, I understand that most people will say, well, what do you need on a LeBron team? You need shooting. LeBron always has shooting. Well, LeBron also always has a big man. He is, I would say, maybe more driven by playing with a great big man than he is with great shooters. I think LeBron believes you can go get great shooters, but I need a great big man to play with. Chris Bosh, Kevin Love, Anthony Davis. And when the Lakers trade Anthony Davis, he's like, all right, I'm out of here. LeBron wants to play with a great big man. And Bam Adebayo is a great big man. And you look at the other teams on this list, the Warriors, Porzingis, and Horford, come on. I mean, those guys can't be trusted to stay on the floor. The 76ers have Joel Embiid, sure, but ditto, can't be trusted to stay healthy. The Cavaliers have Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. I think that makes sense for him too. But he doesn't have a relationship with Allen and Mobley the way that he has a relationship with Bam, the way that he has a relationship with Eric Spoelstra, the way that he has a relationship with that front office. And if I'm LeBron James and I'm only going to play another year or two, I want to know, like, hey, what team am I going to? What team do I go to that, what team do I trust that if I go there, they can put the right team around me? He doesn't have time to go to Cleveland and wait for Kenny Atkinson to figure it out. Or for the Cleveland to figure out that Kenny Atkinson isn't the guy and go get a new coach who could potentially work it out. He doesn't have time for that, right? He wants to go somewhere where the infrastructure is solid, that he can trust it. And what did he say at the Fanatics Fest? He said, I want to go somewhere that practices championship habits in September, October, November, at the beginning of the year. That sounds a lot like the Miami Heat also. It doesn't mean that those other teams don't do it. The Warriors do it. It doesn't mean that these other teams don't do it. But LeBron knows that the Miami Heat do it because he's been a part of it. And he's won there. And so when I say that Miami is most familiar, that's what I mean. And that's why I think Miami is the best spot for LeBron James. What if the NBA season was set up like the World Cup? I tried to reimagine the NBA schedule, and I think I'm onto something. We're going to talk about that next. All right, making good time. I'll try not to blow it with this final segment here, but this is something dumb that I've been thinking about basically during the World Cup, and especially since the World Cup is over. I've been wondering what an NBA season reimagined and built out like the World Cup would be like. Okay? Now, you can come at me right away and say, well, that's the NBA Cup. Adam Silver is obsessed with soccer. He loves how that sport is organized and a lot of things about that sport. And then he builds out the NBA Cup basically in the image of some kind of soccer type of thing with the group stages and all these things. Okay, sure. But nobody really cares about the NBA Cup, right? And it's only for a little bit of time. And at the end of the day, you win the NBA Cup trophy, but it doesn't feel like the World Cup. It doesn't feel as important, right? Maybe eventually it does. I don't think so. Because the championship is the championship. So how do we expand the NBA Cup, that idea, make it more fun, and still lead us to a real champion? Okay. So I rebuilt the entire NBA schedule from scratch based on the World Cup, and you'll tell me at the end whether or not you think this works or not, okay? So first thing, this is going to be after expansion to 32 teams, okay? So that's how I wanted to work it out that way. We're supposed to get expansion to Vegas and Seattle in the next couple of years, so we're going to do it with 32 teams in mind. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to break up the NBA season into stages, all right? So in the World Cup, you have the group stage and you have the knockout round. We need a little bit more because of how the NBA is structured, but the same basic idea of breaking up the season into stages. All right, so we're going to start right away, start the season after preseason exhibitions. We're going to start the regular season with the division stage, okay? This is the closest thing to the group stage. This is the division stage. It's 12 games, right? So again, 32 teams. We're breaking up the divisions in each conference. We're going to 4 4-team divisions. All right. So the division stage is 12 games total, 4 games against your 3 division opponents. That's 12 games. All right. So you're going to play those 12 games. You're just going to play those 12 games. No other games. That's it. That's the other difference between the NBA Cup. Like the group stage of the NBA Cup is sort of baked in and folded into the rest of the regular season, and it's a little confusing. We're not doing that. We're keeping it straightforward. The first 12 games for every team is against their division, right? And we'll figure out how to mix and match those games or whatever. Do you play them all through? You know, does Philadelphia just play Boston, just boom, 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 right? Or do you just kind of break it up? TBD on that. But the idea is that you play your first 12 games against the division, and then that's your group stage. After you come out of the group stage, then we get a seeding. Okay? So we're going to seed every team in the league based on record and point differential. All right? And then we're going to put those teams into new groups based on record similar to the NBA Cup. So this is where it starts to look like the NBA Cup a little bit, but those groups are going to be still in your conference. So now you're going to play every conference team. You're going to start with your group, and then you're going to expand to the other groups, right? So we're going to play these. Now we're in the conference stage. That's 36 games, okay? 36 games. That's 3 games against the 12 teams in your remaining in your conference that you didn't play in the division. So you're going to basically just play those through. So we got the 12 games in the division and then the 36 games in the conference stage. And then we are going to reseed. After that initial seeding, after the conference stage, we're going to reseed into a bracket. That's right. Now we have our first bracket. Not quite the knockout stage yet, but sort of. All right? Because we can't do a knockout stage because the teams that lose still have to play more games. And we're not ready to award the champion yet. We're just trying to finish out the regular season. So we're reseeding into a bracket. 16 games for every team in that of out of conference teams. So we're going to reseed these teams into a bracket of out of conference games. All right. So now we're going to include those 16 games. Or we're going to include those out of conference teams and some conference teams. So basically all these teams are going to be reseeded. It's going to be a Swiss system tournament. So it's not a traditional elimination bracket. You're going to have all 30 teams active for 16 rounds, right? So the teams that win will play winners. The teams that lose will play losers. And you basically have to redo the bracket every time. But that's essentially how we're going to get there. And we're going to have, you're going to have to break this up into days of the week where these games are played so that you have like a break, like a lull of a couple days so that we can reseed and reformat some of these games and travel and all these things. So that will get us to our final seeding for the playoffs. All right, we're going to have 14 teams get an auto bid, okay? I think we go back to conferences for this just because of travel for the playoffs, so you don't want to complicate that. Maybe not. I'm open to both ideas, but we're going to get 14 teams in an auto bid. 7 for each conference, perhaps, or 7 for each side of the bracket, depending if we don't do conferences. And then we're going to get 4 teams into a wild card for the final 2 spots. So we're going to have 16 total playoff games, and then we're just off and running to the regular playoffs, right? Best of 7. We're off and running. Regular playoffs, and then we award the champion at the end. So that's how I think this would work, right? You start with your division stage, then you're in conference stage, then you bring in some of the out of conference opponents and go to a Swiss system bracket. We could do, if you wanted to do more than that's 64 total games. If you want to do more, we can include more games in that final Swiss bracket style stage, that third stage of the regular season. So if you want to get up to like 72 games, you can obviously or 72 regular season games, you can improve. You can increase the amount of games in that bracket. But that's essentially how it would go. I think I'm onto something with this. Hopefully, it wasn't too confusing. You're cutting down games by a substantial margin. No more back-to-backs. Real breaks in between games. Player health will improve. Every game has stakes, right? Because you're reseeding throughout the season. It's competitive balance throughout because of the reseeding. And it breaks up the season into 4 distinct sections. And so within each of those sections, each section is like a mini season. So that first mini season is 12 games. Every game matters because then you get reseeded at the end of that. And that makes what you have to do in the conference stage a little bit easier if you're good during the division stage. And vice versa, right? If you're bad in the division stage, it makes it a little bit more tough in the conference stage, but you still have a chance at that point to, make some headway and end up being in a good spot for that third stage of the bracket. before the playoffs. So I think every game matters a little bit more. We have real rest. It cuts down on regular season games. I think it's a lot of fun. I don't know if it'll work, but that's my idea for reimagining the NBA as a World Cup schedule. That's it for today. RealGM Radio with Wes Goldberg, part of the RealGM Radio Network. Check out Mo DeKill and Jared Dubin on the Double Dribble every Monday and on Wednesday. On Thursday, it's Good Take with me and Mike Shear, where we share our best NBA takes that we've cooked up this week. Stay tuned.